Hello, today I'm going to be looking at Project Fish Tank yet again, and I just copied my code from the last video tutorial into a new program so I'd have a little bit more room instead of that annoying thing over here. And so I also copied the things from above so I could look at the bonus questions. And I'm going to be doing a little bit more advanced of a tutorial. To accomplish some of these goals, I am going to make my objects, my fish, I'm going to make them object oriented. So I need to phrase this function in terms of a constructor. So instead of just propagating these variables down into the block of code that draws the fish, I am going to make a fish object here, and I'm going to have each fish object have a draw method. So I'm going to have to change all of the x's to this.x and this.y, and in here I'm going to have to say stuff like this.x equals x. So I'm going to pause the video and I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to go and make a whole lot of changes so that my fish are objects so that I can pack them into an array. See you in a minute. Welcome back. It actually wasn't that hard. So here are the object's properties, and I changed this and this, and where is that tail? Tail? Oh, it's down here. So this is another property of my object, and this whole draw method depends on the properties of a particular fish object. So I have a test fish object set up right here, and I can change its coordinates. All of this should just be, well, it's not setting up any variables. So what we need to do is to set up an array. And then within the loop, where before we were able to just draw things, we push new fish objects. If you haven't seen this method before, it's built into JavaScript, and it's a method that works on any array, and just anytime it comes across this, then it will put whatever you put in between these two parentheses into this array. So if I was like push I, then all of the iterators got pushed into the array. But instead of pushing I into the array, what I want to do is construct fish objects and construct fish objects with random values, just like I did before, and push them into the array. So I do that by saying new fish, and I put all of those random variables in. The semicolon was probably my error. So now in order to display, I need a second loop. And I need that draw method. So this loop right here, I'm going to put inside of the draw. I'm going to put down a background. Actually, I probably have a background already. So it looks like my draw method is depending on random numbers, and so I'm getting some randomness and some non-randomness. The x and the y values are fixed because all of this code up here only executes once per epoch of the program, and so like I'm putting random values in, but this draw method is getting run multiple times, so the random values in here are constantly changing. So I'm going to pause my video again, and I'm going to fix that so that my fish actually has more properties and nothing is random. Alright, we're back in business. Okay, so the last two videos, the whole point was to get the fish to draw to the screen and inside of the draw loop. And in that last video, we had some kind of crazy randomness. Now I have a loop within the draw function that's rendering all of my fish to the screen without any kind of randomness. And like just really quickly, the way I did that was I added like 3 variables so that they're static. Essentially, they get set up once per program instead of once per frame of the animation. This for loop right here that sets up the fish is outside of the draw function, and all of this is the push method that we had before. I just parsed it out line by line so I wouldn't get confused, and if you didn't know, you can actually have comments within a single statement if you do it this way. So some people like that, some people think it looks neat, some people prefer to put like their random statements out here. I'm just going to do it a combination of different ways. Wow, random capitalization. You can put some short variable names with comments behind them and put your variables in here. So instead of that, maybe like x. I hope I didn't use x anywhere else. and then you would have a bunch of short little variables, and then some people think that that looks really neat and small and compactified and whatever. Do it however you like. Just don't be like me and do all kinds of things mixed together, because this looks really awful. But onwards and upwards. So, okay, I was afraid I broke something. Add seaweed to the tank and make a function to draw it at different places and heights. Or add pebbles to the bottom. I think I'll do both and just make this one insanely long video. So, just like how I have a loop that loops over a bunch of objects in an array, I'm going to do the exact same thing for the seaweed. So constructor var seaweed equals function. So I want my seaweed to be a function of x, because I want them all spaced out in random places along the bottom. And heck, why not put a y in here and a color so that they're all different colors. Bet you thought I was going to pause the video. Too late. And once again, I'm doing things two different ways. Up here, I used the .prototype to access the fish objects. And here, I'm going to do their draw methods from within the constructor. I do that so that you can see lots of different ways and pick out something that you like. Don't emulate me and don't do this craziness. Just pick a way of doing things, whatever works best for you. So, seaweed is kind of like, in my mind, there's probably lots of different kinds, but the one that comes to mind is this wavy, rectangular, I think I'm going to use Beezers to accomplish that, Beezer curves. So if you don't know what that is, you can check out the documentation. It's probably under complex shapes. I could use begin shape and end shape and Beezer vertex, but I was thinking more simply to just use Beezer curve and modify the stroke weight. If I used this, then I'd have to have a vertex along one side and then vertex, and then I'm not even sure, but it looks like somebody's contacting me. Maybe they're answering my help request. Anyways, Beezer vertex is a curve that is defined by two endpoints and two control points. And so I think I'm going to have the two endpoints. Do they have a dynamic one that you can adjust? No. Nope, they're just animating the control points. So this is a control point, and this is an endpoint, and this is an endpoint, and this is another control point. And like the further up here or out here this is, like the further this is going to curve this way, it kind of gravitates towards the control point. It's like a straight line going from this point to this point that got bent. It's as if the line is like attracted to these control points. So to make my my Bezier curves look like seaweed, I'm going to have X and Y coordinates of, I think I'll actually just set Y equal to 400 and just have that be a static so they all start and stop on a vertical line. So I really don't need a Y coordinate is what I'm saying. And then I'll have like the control points be at a halfway point. So I'll have endpoints and control points so that it'll bend out towards the two control points, which will just be halfway down. So I don't need to like assign those either. That's just going to all be encapsulated within the draw method of my Beziers. I'm going to go ahead and pause the video and see if I can work out what the heck I just said. Welcome back. So I just barely set up this. I can't remember where I left off on the last video. Hopefully, if everything went correctly, I will be able to create another for loop and render these seaweed, these randomly allocated chunks of memory of weed objects that draw Bezier curves. And there's my favorite error. Just kidding. Nope. For all of the elements in my seaweed array, take the ith element. Get out of there, A. Access its draw method. Cross your fingers. Whoa, that looks neat. I actually did not anticipate. I forgot to get rid of the fill color on my Bezier curve. I didn't know that Bezier curves could have a fill color. Did I have that in an example? Yeah, that's exactly what happened in the fill color. Fill color. So it is propagating from one of these. Can't be that one, could it? Oh, that's exactly what it is. So just in case I change a fill color somewhere else, that looks actually pretty neat. So I am going to set a fill color similar to that. Put that in as a property of the seaweed objects. And then set the fill. And of course we have to restart. Restart anytime you modify code extensively, but particularly if you're using object-oriented programming, you're going to get a lot of weird errors like this that aren't actual errors, and once you hit restart, they go away. So now if I change the fill color somewhere else for some reason, this fill color will stay the same. And I don't know if that actually worked, because they all look the same to have the same outline. That's a little bit more dynamic. The more I look at them, the less they look like seaweed. So I know I said I didn't need a y value, but I think I'm going to throw in some y values anyways and have them, instead of all, like when I got into the draw method, I realized I needed, I was hard coding a lot of things. So I'm going to make this more dynamic, and I'll leave that as 400, but eventually I'm going to have a variable for the depth of the pebble bed, and so I'm going to need to pass that in, so that's going to be dynamic. And let's see, this 300 right here is the hard-coded top value of these, and these 350s, that's the y value of the control points. Remember how this works? Control point, control point. So I'm going to get some variability into the depth of the control points. So you might see like a little tiny loop right here and a big loop or something like that. And a little bit of variability for these. So see you next time. So welcome back. In the interim between this video and the last video, I was working on the seaweed, and essentially I just added some new parameters. Y is a random number between 100 and 300, I think. Let's go ahead and look in the loop and compare them. So this is new. Yep, it's the top of the Bezier vertex, and 380 hard-coded right now. I don't like hard-coding things, but since I don't have a pebble bed yet, I'm going to let that slide. And that's the bottom of each of the seaweed, right here. Or wait, what was I talking about? 380. So Y2. So yeah, this point is actually the bottom. I started down there. Doesn't matter which end you start at. Y1, Y2 can be interchanged. Well, it does matter in a sense, but since these are all random, I hope you understand what I'm saying and I'm not just rambling. Okay, so the next ones are for the control points, and I just had some hard-coded values in there. Right now everything is dynamic and depending upon some inputs. So I am pretty happy with the way they're looking right now. If you'll notice, like, you even get some like loop backs, that has to do with the possibility of the top of your weed being greater than the control points. So hope that all makes sense. I'm going to, like 10 videos later, I'm going to look at the starter code. I don't know how many videos later, but when I first started this project, I did not even glance at the code that they gave me. I just started pushing these variables into the object and wrapping the code in functionality and making the variables that they made us start out with I was adjusting them, I was like scaling them, transforming them based on my inputs. So now I'm just gonna get rid of some of that starting. I mean, like, I'm inputting integer body L, well, maybe not an integer, but I'm putting in a number. Why have a static hard-coded number in here? Like, that's just confusing, because if you come along and you don't even look into the constructor and the method, and you're just looking at this, and you're trying to scale the tail, for example, maybe right now is not such a great time to talk about that, but before, when I was looking at it, I was like, why aren't these ranges like really having that much of an effect on the range of things I see over here? And it's because I never really looked at that code in there. So, see, here's another one. Like, before it was scaling with the body, and I just want it to depend on the input. X, Y. So tail, I'm gonna have be between like 5 and like 15. L, that must have been the body length. So if I'm gonna have my tails be between like 5 and 15, I want my body length to be something greater than tail for sure. 15 to like 40. And my body height, I want to be like half of that. So I don't know. We'll see how that looks. Quite reasonable. And like half the point that I started like messing with that stuff again is I didn't want my fish to be enormous compared to my seaweeds. So pretty happy with that effect right now as it is. Oh, there was one more thing I wanted to change. I'm gonna go ahead and set up the depth of, wait, what are you doing? Did I get it? There we go. So I'm going to go ahead and set up the depth of the tank. And I'm not going to be wanting my fish to draw inside the pebble range. So here is the Y. I'm going to subtract that variable. And that's one of the reasons I'm setting up a variable, is because it's going to be used in various different scopes. So it's a global variable out here, and I already used it in my fish stuff, and now I'm going to use it in my seaweed stuff. Bottom of the weed. Hard coding the bottom. Oh. There's two ways I could do that. I could put this right here, or I could delete that entire line, delete that input, and just use my global variable. but instead of doing that way, I'm going to put my global variable inside the for loop. Don't think it matters too much which way you do that. Now, I screwed up that part. I don't want to subtract bottom from 400. I just want bottom 0 to that depth. Excellent. So, to set up my pebbles, I could go in here and just say random ellipse somewhere in this range, but just like with the weeds and the fish, you want to have like a static set of pebbles. Now, I'm not going to go and do pebble prototypes, which you could do. Instead, what I'm going to do is use an entirely different method, and I'm going to set up a picture, essentially. Now, if I had like a GIF or a PNG somewhere else on the web, and Khan Academy hadn't disabled that feature, I could load a picture. But instead, what I'm going to have to do is to use the get method, and if you haven't seen the documentation, I have it right here because I use it so frequently. And I might as well point that out even though I know how to use it. But get is right here on processingjs.org/reference, and you can click on any of these functions and read about them. And essentially, what it's telling you is you specify x and y and width and height, and it's going to return a set of pixels the image knows how to use. I believe that it returns a pimage object. So first, let's go and just set up our rock flicking things. I actually want them to be a little bit more oblong, and this random number is going to vary the length of them, so I'll give it a slightly wider range, and this next random number is going to vary the height of each of them, so I'm going to give it a slightly smaller range. I'm sitting here saying range and I tricked my brain. Very pebble-like. Now let's give them some random colors. I want it to look kind of like a rainbow, so I'm going to give each RGB value the full spectrum. Now, I'm going to put that into my project fish code. And now I'm going to use the get. So I'm going to set up a pimage object. Pebbles is a good name. I don't know if I spelled that at all right. So get returns the image object, which you can use within the image function, just like you would say var boy equals get image, whatever. That's going to return an image object that you use later as like your character. But this, you're just grabbing a section of the screen. And so the section of the screen that I want, as you saw on that other side, was 0 and bottom was the coordinates of the top left part of the section that I want. And the width was width, and the height was, well, dynamically it would be height minus bottom. Height, H-E-I-G-H-T-H-E-I. So the next step is to copy that name of the image, and right after the background, I think after the background, I don't think it matters. Put your image object in, the coordinates. These two optional parameters aren't going to matter because the dimensions of this Pebbles image is already correct. So, like for example, I could scale it and I could say 200. What just happened? Looks like you're trying to use an image. Maybe you can't use just one of them. Yeah, apparently if you use one of the optional parameters, you need to use both of them. So putting this 200 in here instead of 400 scaled that. But instead of doing either of those, I'm just going to leave it how it was before. And just in case, because like maybe like right there, there's like some background showing through. Before I capture that image, I'll put a background down. So any spaces. Now to keep them from cutting off, I need to change some of these ranges. So the x coordinate is okay, but the y coordinate, well, that's going to depend on the height. So it's possible for an image like this, looks like this pebble right here has a y coordinate of bottom, and to prevent it from cutting that top off, I need to put that range down to bottom plus, well, the maximum height is 10, so but the 10 is more like a diameter than a radius. So the maximum distance would be a 5. So I'm going to say bottom plus 5. And now absolutely none of them are getting cut off. Well, what have we done? Add seaweed. Make a function to draw it at different places and heights. I think that's just worded a little bit weird, but that's essentially what we did. Like, I don't think you're supposed to have to dynamically add the seaweed. Add pebbles to the bottom. Bubble drawing function. Mouse interactivity. I think I'm going to go and do mouse interactivity first because I've done that before. So the way this is going to work is anytime the mouse is clicked, I'm going to add a fish to the fish array, just like I actually should just copy this syntax right here. All of this was how we added fish in the for loop, but we're just going to do it anytime the mouse is clicked. And if you want to make it so that they are added at the X and Y locations where you click, first of all, I'm going to get rid of that stupid notation. Instead of putting in a random number, put in mouse X and mouse Y. To make them bubble. We could give each fish its own array of bubble objects. So first we'll go ahead and make a bubble object. Okay, if you haven't seen this before, this is the alpha channel. I'm just making it a little bit transparent. And now I'll do an ellipse. For simplicity, all my bubbles are going to be the same dimensions. What do bubbles do? They rise. So I need a method on my bubble objects that is capable of modifying their y property. And instead of just rising in a straight line, I'm going to make them rise kind of wishy-washy by randomly mutating the x-coordinate. So this is an array that's going to hold the bubble objects, and we're going to, for each fish, we're going to constantly add bubbles into that array. Well, not constantly. In fact, we'll just do that within the loop that handles the fish objects right here. And before I add them in, I'm going to use modular arithmetic. This is well beyond the scope of this project, I realize, but if you want to do all of the bonus objectives, hopefully you can figure this out. Frame count mod 60, that ought to emit a bubble every second. Just a really quick rundown. Mod is like division, so frame count mod 60 is like frame count divided by 60. Frame count is a variable that keeps track of how many frames have gone by. And mod, instead of just dividing, it returns the remainder. So every time frame count is a multiple of 60, the division is going to happen without a remainder. In other words, frame count mod 60 will be equal to 0. So, and that's going to happen approximately every second. So approximately every second, what we want to do is we want to add a bubble to every fish in the array. And the way we're going to do that is, I already forgot what this is called, bubble list. So we're going to access the bubble list, and we're going to push bubbles into it. Probably named it .x, yes indeed, and .x will probably be like the center of the body's coordinates, if I remember. So looks like half of body length will put me out to the fish's mouth, if you catch my drift, which is body L. This dot body L. Give me a second while I drink something. Losing my voice. So instead of putting the bubble right in the center of the fish, I can't use this dot notation in the scope of the draw loop. That would mean like the draw loops.x method. Hopefully that does it. If not, I'm going to stop recording and fix it. This is the end of that conditional. So every second, push a new bubble into the ith fish's ith bubble list. To display, we're going to need to loop over the bubble list. And access each bubble's draw method. And there was another method. And it looks like I have errors. Rise. Looks like I didn't end the construction. Glitch. Perfect time to introduce a troubleshooting technique I use quite frequently. Try catch. Every line of code that you suspect might be an error, you put between these two curly braces for try, and then after that second one you put a catch. And this is going to be 2 hours long and YouTube's not going to want to upload it. Now, I figured out what my error is. This loop depends on the variable I, and this inner loop also does. So, J it up. Wait. This needs to be an I, because we're going to do for all the J's in the ith fish. All the fish I, J, the jth bubble in the ith fish. There are the bubbles. Now, as if this isn't convoluted enough, once these bubbles go up here, they're just going to keep continuing, and eventually the program will crash because there will be a trillion bubbles. It'll crash way quicker than a trillion. So there's a couple of solutions. One thing we could do is every so many frames, just delete the entire bubble array. But my preferred method would probably be to detect the y-coordinate of the bubble, and I'm thinking that I want to do that in this loop, so I'm going to move this down here, because once I detect that coordinate, I'm going to delete that bubble from the array, and so I want that to be the last thing that I do with that array, so I don't ever I don't want to be deleting stuff from the array and then somewhere else try and access that element of the array. That's going to cause a whole nother error. So for the jth bubble in the ith array, I need to detect if its y coordinate is less than 0. And if that is true, then I need to get rid of it. So the way you get rid of things from an array is to use the splice method. And once again, good practice. If you don't know something, just Google it. And those top 2 results will probably tell you what you need to know. I'm not affiliated with either of these, but they are both essentially online reference manuals for various web development technologies. They're pretty cool. So I'll just tell you, instead of promoting their websites, how to do that. This is essentially your array name, and I'm accessing the splice property of the arrays, and I'm going to tell it the index that I want to splice and how many things I want to splice out. Of course, I still have an error. I was going to say, of course you won't notice a difference because oh, that's interesting. I think I may have... See, as soon as that bubble touched the top, then it tried to splice. So watching a program and just noticing something like, oh, it freezes with this bubble half out, that kind of thing is a very good troubleshooting technique. It tells you a little bit about the error that you're having. So essentially this isn't an array for some reason at that moment. Probably because it's I want this to be the last video, but I'm going to stop the video and probably do one more. Welcome back. I finally figured out the glitch I was having with trying to get rid of my bubbles. I actually had a couple of different things wrong. I was using an I right here instead of a J, and I'm inside this inner for loop. So J is my reference to which bubble I'm trying to get rid of. And another thing, I had something right here. I think it might have been this. So when it was like dot splice, it was like trying to call dot splice upon the actual bubble object instead of upon the array, which is this. Remember right here, this is the array name, and so anyways, I got rid of that and I changed that, and now when you see them get to the top, like, you know that they're getting deleted from the array, because instead of seeing the bottom half of the bubble move up, you see them, it kind of looks like they're popping, but they're just being deleted from the array. I also have a break statement in here. It's not really necessary, but like I was saying earlier, you can get into trouble if you try to access elements of the array that you've already deleted. So it's kind of good practice to like break out of that loop so that your iterator will start back at 0. So there's no, like, once you delete, say, like if this is the 10th bubble and I delete the 10th bubble, then I go and try and look at like the 11th bubble. Well, once I deleted the 10th bubble, the 11th bubble became the 10th bubble. So what I need to do is I need to break out of the loop so that the next time I get to that point where I'm looking at what was the 11th bubble, it has now has the appropriate reference. Okay, I might make one more video. I was going to make, actually I think I can just do it right now. I was going to make the fish have another method and have them swim along. I think that'll put a nice finish effect on our little project. So wherever those fish objects are, I'll make a new method. Just simply increase the x coordinates. Now I need to find the loop where draw is handling the fish objects, and I'll just copy that line of code right there. And call the swim. Call the swim function for each fish. Isn't that beautiful? Alright, if any of you actually made it this far, kudos to you, and thanks for watching my video. Have a good day.